Hey Braxton, thanks for jumping in with me, man. We've been
Hey,
we've been chatting for a while. I'm super
yeah,
stoked to have you on, man.
yeah, super excited. I don't normally do haven't really been on a podcast before, but I love your guys' mission and who you're reaching out to. It's right up my alley, so I thought I'd hop on here. I'm excited.
Wait, so is this your first podcast?
It is actually. Yeah, I've gotten a couple of people who wanted me to do some, but never actually hopped on. But like I said, your niche and who you're reaching out to, that's right up my alley.
Dude, let's freaking go. I'm glad to
Yeah.
to be your first one. Dude, I mean, initially I found you through I think some like random LinkedIn posts. We're connected to the same people. I saw your profile. I saw that you were at a Wardco. You had some other sales jobs, and you started your outsourced SDR company. And so I was like, this guy's got to be interesting. And we had our first phone call, and I was like, dang, we should have just like recorded that for a podcast because it was so cool to hear your story.
No, I know we probably should have just click record, but I'm excited to be on here. Yeah, it's a ton of experience in the software world and all that stuff. So hopefully I can share some knowledge here and benefit some listeners and kind of tell them about my journey.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you're perfect because you're 2 to 3 years ahead of where someone like myself or another salesperson that wants to start a business is at. So it's great that you are so fresh in the weeds in the thick of grinding it out. Um, but for people that don't know who Braxton Porter is, could you just give me like a 1 2 minute intro of like your background in sales and like what led to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, for sure, no worries. So my name is Braxton Porter. I've been an SDR slash account executive at a couple different companies, probably totaling about 5 6 years in both of those roles. Um, that's probably one thing that I would mention is I love sales. I love that work. I love the psychology behind it. I love learning about it. It's something I'm super passionate in. Other than that, I'm a pretty boring dude. Like I love basketball. I love sports. Been married for about 3 years now. No kids yet, but other than that, it's just work and hanging out with my wife and learning and trying to get better. So I'm a pretty simple dude, but that's kind of a quick introduction for me.
Cool. Yeah. And you run an awesome company. So what got you into sales in the first place?
Yeah, so um, I've listened to a lot of your podcasts, and it seems to be a theme, um, or maybe not a theme, but it seems like everyone gets into entrepreneurship or sales in different ways. One thing that got me into sales is I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. That's why I started sales, and I've always heard from listening to people that I respected that sales has got to be one of the top qualities that you have if you want to become an entrepreneur. So I was like, hey, if I'm going to do this, I got to learn how to sell. So I started looking around for some different sales gigs, landed a great sales development role that it was like one of those stories you hear of people applying for a job that they're definitely not qualified for and like somehow getting it. That was my luck in this role. So I applied for a sales development role at a company called Easy Storage Solutions. Um, it's a very, very successful company, pretty small in terms of like on people's radar. It's a software company. But I applied for that job and basically fell in love with it from there. So I learned a ton from some great mentors there. But getting into sales, it was basically because I did want to become an entrepreneur, and that's one thing that I've noticed is you have to have that sales experience. So that's kind of why I got into sales in the first place.
For sure, especially for someone in your situation where you started something from scratch. I think you've got to have that charismatic internal drive to be able to grow something and sell something when it's not on the market already. Um, so that's and I feel like yeah, you already mentioned it. A lot of people just kind of fall into it. You wanted to do it for business. Um, so and then what at what point did you sorry, so Format's your company. At what point did you decide to start that company, or were you starting other companies prior to that?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So, truly, I kind of got lost in the sale of roles. So, I started sales to become an entrepreneur, but it was something that sales I was really good at, and I was really good at pretty fast. So, I stuck with sales for a while. Like I said, it was about a 5 to 6 year period of me becoming an SDR, moving my way up to an AE, working at a couple different companies there, just kind of building my experience. that whole time knowing eventually I wanted to start my own thing, I had no clue what that thing would be, right? I didn't have a need that I felt like I could fulfill to start a business. And honestly, I just didn't have that vision yet, right? So I always knew I wanted to start a business, but I didn't know what that was. And I had such great sales positions that I was kind of just trying to be patient there. Um, and then eventually one day I was actually working for a company. I won't necessarily say who it was, but I was an account executive there, and I was always really good at being a SDR. And I felt like I was almost a better SDR than I was an account executive. I don't know how true that was. Um, but I noticed that these companies, these high-end tech companies, they're paying sales development reps so much money, and they're not necessarily providing the value in terms of the salary they're getting or the bonuses, whatever that might be. And it was something that I was really good at, like I mentioned. So I was like, hey, I saw that need there, and I said, hey, I'm gonna go and try to do this on my own. I can become an outsourced sales development rep, really dial in my processes there, and do it for other companies. So I kind of noticed that need at some of these companies I was working at, is that these SDRs, they're getting paid so much and not providing necessary the value, because it's kind of an entry level sales position. Um, so using that kind of experience in the sales world, I said, hey, let me go try and start my own thing and do this for other companies, because it's something I was always good at. So eventually I saw that need, and I tried to go fulfill it doing my own company, which ended up being Format. So that's kind of how I made that shift from sales to actually starting my own company.
Okay, so you're an account executive. You notice that you're good at lead gen, essentially. There's, it's something you enjoy, it's something you don't get tired of, it's something you think that you can do better than other companies at fairly easily. Uh, is it something you started with as a side hustle, or how did that start up?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So, um, over my years of in the sales industry, I was really good at saving my money. So I knew eventually one day I was going to make that leap, right? And I remember, I think it was Dave Ramsey who I got this from, but he said, make sure the boat is close enough to the dock before you jump on it. And he's talking about,
Really good
make
phrase.
sure, yeah, make sure make sure if you are going to take that leap, you might as well build it up as much as possible before actually making that jump. So I had a really good savings. It wasn't necessarily too risky for me to leave, some of these high paying account executive jobs to make that leap. But it was something that I was working on probably for, I want to say probably 3 or 4 months. I was kind of building out the infrastructure, doing all the boring thing. And it's probably fun for some people, but for me, like building the logo, trying to get a good website, um, just all that, to me, like I said, boring work. But then eventually I was like, hey, if I'm going to do this, I got to go all in and I got to leave my job. So that's probably about 3 to 4 months at my account executive job was I building this on the side.
I'm sure that's a very telling time when, you know, that 3-month period where you were trying to start this side hustle while you were at a job. I'm sure you're working during the day and then working at nights on this. Probably more excited about going home and working on your side hustle than you were at your day job. But I'd be curious to hear about like a first customer story, or how you found your first customer, what that experience was like.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting thinking about where we are now and when I started, which was probably about 2.5 years ago. We've been in business, so thinking
Mhm.
all the way back then is pretty wild, to be honest, as it's so much different. But what we would originally do is I didn't have time to cold call for my own company, right? Because I was so focused on my account executive job. I didn't have time to do stuff during the day. So I had to rely on stuff that could be kind of automated during the day, and then I could focus on it at night. Um, so what I did is I set up some email campaigns, kind of learned how to do all that, where you can basically mass blast email campaigns, which I'm not too big of a fan of. But we I set some automated campaigns up and got a couple of positive replies from it. So book those meetings towards like the very end of the day, the end of my work day. I'd go in a little early to so I could have that time at night to actually go and kind of pitch these people. Hopped on. We had a really, really good offer for, because I was very inexperienced. We had a really good offer for companies that we first started to work with, and not a very good offer for us. We were basically saying, hey, we'll work for free until we get you guys, some really good meetings. And so that's kind of our first client success stories. I got them through email, sold them at the end of the day, and kind of worked on them at night and setting up email campaigns for them as well. And that happened a couple of times. And that's when I realized, like, hey, if you want to take this to the next level, you can't be spending all your time at an account executive job. You're going to really have to focus on these companies that you promise business to. So that's also what kind of pushed me to make that jump.
What kind of companies were you selling to at the beginning?
At the beginning, it was a lot of, and this is something we still stick with today, but we really try to focus on like very niche specific businesses. So we set up two different targeting campaigns. One was to online marketing companies, and the other one is kind of unique, but it was staffing companies. So we reached out to staffing companies saying like, hey, we can get you more companies to reach out to and try to put, they were a staffing company, so they're trying to put their clients into companies. So we'd reach out to them and say, hey, we have a great infrastructure to try and do that for you. So it was online marketing companies and staffing companies at first that we really worked with.
Okay, and so why did you work well with them?
Yeah, so online marketing companies, I really understood SEO, running ads, Google ads, Facebook ads, all of that stuff from some of my previous software experience. I mentioned easy storage. I sold a ton of, we'd sell the software, but there was a lot of upselling that went on. A lot of, hey, if you buy the software, we also can do SEO for you, that kind of stuff. So I really understood SEO and running ads. So that was one reason I wanted to reach out. And then kind of similar is I also had a little bit of experience just from some of my friends that worked at staffing companies. And they always said one of their biggest problems at the companies that they worked with is they just couldn't get enough companies to reach out to. So I thought it made sense to reach out to them. And so one of them was experience, and the other one was just kind of hearing, hey, this is a problem that we have. So I thought we should try and target it. It ended up working out pretty well, actually.
That's super interesting. And I'm curious if part of the reason it did well is maybe staffing companies have less sophisticated ways of prospecting. Is that part of it? Like, I mean, I know people that work at staffing companies. I know they're not all the most sophisticated from a sales side. A lot of times they're working with people that are trying to get back into the workforce, or that have a hard time finding jobs. And so, I mean, like, you go look at their websites, maybe they're not the best. Does that kind of play into it, or what makes them a good prospect for you?
Yeah, I think a lot of that, what you said, has to come into play. To be honest, I didn't even think of it like that when we first reached out. I was just thinking, hey, I'm gonna just mass blast these emails out and see if we can land some clients. But looking back at it, I do think that has a lot to come into play, and I think that's something that I've seen as well as we've gotten bigger, and I'm sure we'll get into, but. I've noticed that some of the clients that we work with now, it's not necessarily that they're not tech savvy, but it's more they don't have the time to do an SDR job, right? Is these smaller companies, they want to focus on their actual product, right? And they don't have time to go out and try and sell it. So they'll utilize us. But in the early terms, I think staffing, they were a little bit behind in terms of doing like email outreach and stuff. And so I think that does come a lot into play and why it was so intriguing to them at the beginning. But I would say that was pretty lucky, to be honest. Like I did not, that was not calculated or anything like that. It was just pure luck.
Well, no, and I like how you're able to take something you learn in tech and apply it to different businesses. Because I would have never thought of a staffing company hiring an SDR, but it would make a lot of sense if they could have an SDR just at the fraction of a cost, right? Because they might not be able to pay an SDR 60, 80, 90 grand a year to come fill their pipelines. But if they could pay, I mean, I don't know what you guys charge, but a fraction of that and still drive some inbound lead flow through an outsourced SDR shop, I think that makes a lot of sense. And then you said the other use case was online marketing companies. Can you help me understand like what made them a good customer for you?
Yeah, so like I said, I had a lot of experience in that. So reaching out to them, I was able to really go toe to toe with them and understand their services, which they really liked. I basically could say like, hey, I know exactly what you guys are trying to sell. I've sold this a million times over and over in the past years. So I really know what you guys are trying to sell. I'm just going to take that knowledge and try to apply it to your business to get you guys more qualified meetings, right? So truly at the beginning, it was just relying on my expertise that I learned at other companies. So that's why we targeted those types of companies. We still work with a lot of online marketing companies, actually. And I think it's just because I feel like, the scripts that I've come up with and my knowledge that I've passed down to my employees and stuff, that's why we reached out to them at the beginning, and that's kind of why we've stuck with them as well. So that's what made them such a good client at the beginning for us.
What's an example of sorry, I'm just trying to come back on this. What's an example of one of those online marketing companies? What would that kind of look like?
Like what services they offered?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what type of business those companies do.
Yeah, so for example, like we would reach out to an online marketing company that specifically targeted dental practices, right? For example. So this
Okay.
online marketing company, they would specifically focus on doing online marketing for dental practices. So they would do like search engine optimization for those dental practices. They would run they would run like Google Ads for those dental practices. They would run, Facebook, Instagram ads, sometimes even. Um, I mean, anything in terms, they do optimizations to their website. If their website sucked, they would build them a better one. So anything under the umbrella, almost most of the time, these online marketing companies would do. So they would kind of have a niche that they would want us to reach out to, and then we would do that on their behalf.
That's actually another interesting niche that you have there, because I could imagine a consultant or somebody that runs a small agency, maybe they have 5 or 6 employees, and they really just want to manage their accounts. They really just want to spend time with their customers and let them grow, because if you have a small agency, you don't have time to do all this outreach. But again, if I could hire you and you do it for a fraction of the cost, and you're going to go knock on doors, send out emails, uh, you know, do the call scripts or whatever magic that you're running, that saves me a lot of time and effort, because it's so much work to build the sequences. And I mean, I work in tech, and we build out a whole go to market team, but that's because we have funding, and that's because we have 20 people under the sales organization that are literally dedicated to this part of growth. But uh, for a marketing agency or for a staffing company, they just want to grow. And sometimes the ad dollars don't mean a lot because they don't convert as high, right? Like, I can run Google ads, but they might not convert the same as an SDR that's constantly outreaching. So I think that makes a ton of sense. In our last call, you mentioned some of the cool and creative ways that you do prospecting. I was curious if you could like walk through some of those again, because I know you had like the stamp collection that you were sending out.
Yeah.
But I'm curious if you have any other cool stories of things that you've done for prospects that have really uh, been creative and set format apart, aside from any other sort of outsourcing SDR group.
Yeah, for sure. No, and it's very, very unique. And I think that's what separates us from a lot of, because being an outsourced SDR company, like that's not a groundbreaking
Oh
idea,
yeah.
but it's kind of how we actually get these meetings for other companies that is groundbreaking. Um, Throughout my sales career, I've had a lot of great mentors, and I've been through a lot of really cool courses that have kind of teach me all of these different things and on how to get meetings through creative ways and stuff. So I can't take credit for all of these ideas. So shout out to all the people that have helped me come up with this kind of stuff. But basically, the idea behind all these creative ways to get meetings is you just want to stand out from the noise. I mentioned how we do email campaigns and stuff. A lot of other people are doing email campaigns, right? Like someone might receive 5, 6, 20, 25 cold emails throughout the day. We want to stand out from all that noise. So what we've decided to do is take it up a notch, be really personalized, and actually send them some sort of like physical package that shows that we really care about getting a meeting with them. And then again, that it's really creative and custom. So you already mentioned some of the ideas. We send a lot of cutting boards with their name engraved on it, and the cutting boards come with a handwritten note that will say something like, hey, let's cut out some time on your calendar to talk about, how we can help solve X, Y, and Z, whatever the company is that we're prospecting for. We've done stamps before where we get their name engraved on a wooden ink stamp. You dip it in ink and you can put it on a paper or whatever, and it's their last name and then approved on it. So it's like a stamp of approval. So we'll say, hey, you probably give your stamp of approval all the time. Thought we'd give you an actual one and try to use that as stamp of approval to get your stamp of approval on a quick meeting. Obviously the wording there sucked, but you kind of get the idea of it. And truly, it's just, again, to stand out from all the noise. One that's way cheaper than doing all those stuff is, this is something I learned from a course. It's called the Sales Rebellion by Del Dupree. I don't know if you've ever heard of Del Dupree on LinkedIn or anything, but it's
Yeah.
like a crumpled letter. You basically write up a letter and you crumple it all up and you send it to them in the mail. And the letter says like, hey, are you wondering why this is all crumpled up? Well, it's because most of the sales material you get is trash anyway. So I thought I'd crumple it up for you. But before you throw this in the trash, let me take a quick second to give you a quick pitch. And then when you call them, it's a great follow-up, right? Because you're calling them and you're saying like, hey, instead of strictly a cold call, now you're calling them and saying like, hey, did you get my crumpled letter? Does that ring a bell? Did you get that crumpled letter? And they're like, oh my gosh, if they did get it, they're like, holy cow, that was super creative, right? And then it just completely breaks the ice. So it's just fun stuff like that that just makes you unique, makes you stand out, shows the prospect that you actually care instead of just mass blasting emails out with AI and trying to get a meeting. So that's kind of the psychology behind it all, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember. I think you told me, do you charge on a usage basis, like how many meetings you book for them, or do you just charge a flat rate? I can't remember how you do your billing.
Yeah, so truly it's been all over the place. So we've done a lot of performance-based stuff. We've done a lot
Hmm.
of, monthly fee type stuff. It's really kind of when we pitch the client, we obviously have a couple different offers. Whatever fits best for them is what we'll go through. But we have a couple different options for people. The pay per meeting stuff obviously works really well because it's not risky for the client, and it's kind of based on performance. Everyone likes that a little bit better, but we do have clients that pay us monthly to do that kind of stuff, so it's kind of all over the board there.
Yeah. Well, I was just wondering, some of these creative ways that you do, I'm sure cost more than others, and I was curious how you manage cost per lead and how those end up paying themselves off or not.
Yeah, and that's a great question because that's at the end of the day, we're in business to make money, right? And we have to make sure that our methods that we're using and that we're spending a lot of money on are actually booking these meetings. Um, and when we do these big campaigns for these companies, we've done it so much that we know for a fact that it's going to work. We've really dialed in our methods. So when we do have a pay per performance model, like I said, we're very confident in being able to make up the money spent because it does cost a lot. I mean, imagine sending 25, 50 different custom wooden cutting boards, the shipping costs,
Oh
the
yeah.
packaging costs, having them engraved. Like it does cost a lot of money, but we know because of our models, we're going to make that money up in the back end for sure.
So what's the conversion rate on something like that when you do it? When you do it the right way? Like let's say you did 100 contacts that you were outreaching for this firm. What's the conversion rate on something like that?
Yeah, it's really high. I mean, you have to take into account, the niche that you're targeting. You have to take into account how good your offer is, right, for the company that you're actually prospecting for. There's so many different things that you have to take into account. But like to actually get a meeting, it's a very, very high success rate. Like the other day, I did a campaign of 25 cutting boards. One of my employees was doing all the follow up and working our processes on that. And I think they booked about 15 meetings with
Holy
them.
cow.
And yeah, it's a very high success rate. But I mean, that list is very, very detailed. I mean, we're only doing, like I said, we're only doing 25 reach outs. So, we have the perfect email for that person. We have their physical address. We know exactly what need we're reaching out for. So it's very, very targeted. It takes a lot of work to get those leads, but it does yield very, very high results most of the time.
That's incredible. And it sounds very intimate because I've been, at several companies where we've done forms of gifting. I follow Sendoso. I know like some of those companies that do it, but I feel like I get mixed reviews on how well the success works with some of those. And I imagine a lot of it is just how well the execution is because anyone could send a cutting board listening to this podcast, right? Anyone can send it, but unless you have the targeted follow up that makes sure that it follows through, I'm sure that's what helps separate you from the pack, which is also nice that you're so targeted and you say, hey, we're only going after these 25 accounts because one, you're not doing a spray and pray, which everybody does.
Hmm.
You're less dependent on email and you have a higher conversion rate and they're actually the clients that you want. So I imagine that those things really work in your favor. I guess, where do you see companies get it wrong when it comes to gifting and doing creative outreach? Because I'm sure you've seen a lot of situations where people try to copy what you're doing and it just does not work out the way they want.
Yeah, I would say, and that's a really good question because you laid out the number one problem is the follow up. So the follow up is key. I would say, for example, that campaign that we sent 25 cutting boards out, not one of them reached out to us. So there is
Mm,
so much work that goes into the back end. We walk them through obviously a specific campaign, but every single one of those meetings that we booked came from the efforts of my employees. No one, not one person from that campaign reached out and said, yeah, let's book a meeting, right? um so that's the first thing, is the follow up. It has to be very dialed in, it has to be genuine, and it has to be personalized, that kind of stuff. So that's the first thing that I would say. And the second thing that I would say is, I am like, I'm anti-gifting, I'd probably say. So when I send a cutting
really?
board, yeah, when I send a cutting board, I'm not thinking like, hey, I'm going to send this person a gift or like try and bribe them. Um, and obviously some people would kind of see it that way. But when I think of gifting, I think of someone who's sending out an automated email campaign and they say like, hey, digital lunch on me. I'll offer you like a $15 gift or e-gift card to Chick-fil-A if you hop on a meeting with me, or something like that. You've probably seen some stuff like that. Um,
Oh, yeah.
but I think the idea there that you can separate the two is, with this, we call it contact marketing, but when we send this stuff out, we're doing it to show genuine interest in trying to solve a problem for them. We're not trying to gift them something to kind of bribe them on a meeting. I think that's the difference between the two. There's some really fine line there, right? That some people would take it both ways. But I think if you have the idea and kind of the psychology of like, hey, we're just using this as a creative way to get in touch with someone, it's very different than like, hey, I'm just going to try and send this person a gift and hope I get lucky. So that's probably the difference between the two. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's kind of my idea behind it.
Oh, for sure. No, and I've had situations where we've run gifting campaigns in the past. For example, uh, we did this Nike campaign, and I only had one person reach back out, and I took a demo with him, and he liked it. And then afterwards, he emailed my marketing guy, "Hey, like, where do I get the Nikes?" And I emailed him, and I was like, "Hey, man, like, when's that next meeting?" And he like never got back to me. I was like, "Well, I guess
Exactly.
I can't be mad at him because like I would do the same thing if somebody was like, 'Hey, I'll give you a $50 gift card if you take a meeting with me.' It's like, well, like $50 gift card's a $50 gift card. I can stonewall you for 20 minutes, you know?"
Yeah. And
Uh,
I think
and so
that's,
so there's another so then there's the next question is how do these do on the conversion side? When out of the 16 meetings you booked out of 25, how do those end up holding up on the other end when they meet with the staffing agency or the marketing agency?
that's a really great point you made. Is it's not only, obviously for us, we're trying to book these qualified meetings for people, but our clients are not going to stay with us if those meetings that we're getting for people never convert into anything, right? So that's a huge portion of it. I also, the story you laid out is perfect to distinguish the two, is because I would say that is probably, my doorbell just went off. I don't know if you can hear that, but the big difference between those two is the actual, how the meetings actually go. How does the sales cycle actually go, right? Based off of this stuff. Um, and like I said, you laid out a perfect example of, if you gift someone something, they might just hop on a meeting. You might get a chance to pitch someone. They're completely not interested whatsoever. There's no point in having that meeting, right? Where if you actually give someone something meaningful that makes them think like, oh, hey, this company could actually solve a problem of mine, those meetings are going to go a lot better and actually could lead to an opportunity to sell someone, which is the ultimate goal, right? Um, so yeah, I think that's the big part, and that's the reason we do that stuff, is because these meetings do have a very high success rate to turn into an opportunity, to actually walk through the sales cycle. Whereas if you're just gifting someone, they might just use you for the gift, right? So I would say that's probably the difference between the two. And that's a great point that you brought up.
Well, the other thing too is like the timing of it, right? Because if I say, "Hey, I'll give you this if you hop on with me," I'm like holding the carrot on my end. Whereas with you, like you gave them the cutting board or the crumpled letter. Those things were creative ways to get the attention of the person, but they're not hopping on the meeting to get another treat, right? Like they're hopping on the meeting because you brought some sort of value early
Exactly.
on. And so I like that a lot. I guess so. You guys have been doing this for 2 years. Uh, you started when the boat was just barely leaving the dock. I'm sure it was like really small. Can you kind of tell me what the growth's been like? How many customers you guys started with and where you're at today?
Yeah, for sure. So this is probably being an inexperienced entrepreneur. This is probably where I would say a lot of my lesson has been learned is trying to actually scale something. I mean, you hear that all the time. If you've never actually started a business and you listen to a bunch of business podcasts and it's something that you're very interested in, you always hear like, you have to be able to scale, or scaling is one of the most important things. I did not understand. I did not understand that at all, right? So through this experience, I've learned a lot about trying to do it. Every business is different, right? But in terms of what we started with and where we are at now, so originally we onboarded a lot of clients and it was kind of a disaster, right? I told you in the beginning, we had such a good offer where we basically were like, you pay us nothing. If we get you a qualified meeting, you pay us X amount. We were charging so low for that qualified meeting that we'd get someone. We were working with any company underneath the sun that would say yes to us, because we did not understand, hey, we want to work with good companies who have good offers, that have really good case studies, that actually can provide value to a client. And we were just working with everyone. So, we probably started out within the first year, we probably got 10 to 15 clients, but a lot of those were probably not good clients. They were, like I said, they were clients who, they're basically in it for the money. They didn't really care if they were helping
Hmm.
their companies. They didn't really have a good offer. They have no case studies to kind of back up what they were saying. All that stuff is really, really important. So over the years to where we are now, we're probably at 20 to, I'd say actually closer to 30 companies. Where they all have really good offers, have really good case studies to kind of back up what we're saying, and that makes our job really easy, right? So we've partnered with a lot of good companies, and we're actually at the point now where we don't necessarily, we're not bringing on all these companies to work with at once. Like, we're very analytical about the companies that we're bringing on now, because we want these companies to be very high quality, and we're not necessarily in the business to go get new clients. We're in the business to optimize what we currently have and the clients that we currently have, to try to make that scaling a little bit easier, to kind of go full circle. So our model has changed so much from the beginning that it's honestly a night and day different type of company than what we started with, and what we currently are at now.
And how many people work for you right now?
So right now I have about 3 to 4 people. I say 3 to 4 because one of them is part-time, and a contractor. So we have some people that get leads for us. Obviously, we have to have a very targeted lead list. We use like a lot of VA companies, a lot of
Mm,
outsourced work. But in terms of like full-time sales development reps, we have about 3 of them.
okay, that's incredible, and they're super busy booking meetings.
Yeah, they're extremely busy booking meetings. So like I said, we have different methods on how we get meetings for all of these companies. And what we've done is we just have very dialed in processes for each one of them. So they're in charge of just running those processes for multiple different companies. And yes, their sole job is to just get those qualified meetings on our clients' calendars, so that we can provide value. And it's pretty easy to manage because, like I said, we have really good processes for all that. But I think that's one of my main goals for 2024 is to bring on new hires, train them up so that we can expand and kind of bring on more companies.
That's incredible. Yeah, I think what you're doing is really awesome. I love how you've been able to take a skill that you developed in your W-2 sales job, got really good at it. You were able to monetize it outside of your W-2, build this business. It's very targeted. I'm sure you could have never imagined where you started and where you're at today. So it's fun to kind of look back and connect the dots. Um, but for people that, aren't in that point and they can't see like where the dots are in the future or what the business is. Somebody that's working a 9 to 5 wants to start or buy a business. If you could just give them like one piece of advice, what would you say to those people?
Yeah. So my one piece of advice, and for some reason, I don't know if this is a skill I have or one of my top qualities or something, but like I don't realize how bad something sucks until I'm out of it. I don't know if that's a skill or not, but basically you just have to start. Like I started my sales process or my sales career because I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I always knew I was going to make that leap someday. But over the years, I've had so many friends go down the same path, and they've never made that jump because it's a scary jump to make, right? If you're going to do something, you're going to have to eventually start it and make that leap. Um, so like my advice to someone who's in sales and they want to acquire a company or they want to start their own company, I would kind of go back to that Dave Ramsey quote of getting the boat closest to the dock as possible before making that leap. But eventually you're going to have to make that leap and go all in on what you guys want. So if I did have one piece of advice, I would say that. And like I said, I think that's one quality that I had is I didn't realize how hard it would be. I was pretty naive in terms of starting my own business. So I just kind of went for it, figured it out along the way, and made the most of what I had. So that's probably what I would give advice for.
That's incredible. Yeah. I was talking to another guest on the show just yesterday morning, and it seems like there's this 90-10 rule where 90% of people want to start or buy a business or buy real estate, and it's only like 5 to 10% of reps that actually do. It kind of reminds me like growing up, like I used to go skiing all the time, and all my friends would be like, "Yeah, I want to do a backflip, or I want to learn how to like ski a cliff." And like no one ever does it until somebody does it, and then like other people will finally do it. And so I think it's kind of scary, but then like you just try it and then you get there. So but dude, thanks so much for coming on and being a part of the show. I love your story, and I'll put the links in the show notes so that way people can connect with you on LinkedIn or wherever you're located.
Yeah, definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I try to be a sales influencer on there. I'm not very good at it. It's something I'm working on. But yeah, I'd love to connect with you guys. And thanks for having me on. It's been fun. Like I said, this is like the perfect niche. I don't normally hop on podcasts and kind of talk about my business, but I truly believe that salespeople are the number one entrepreneurs in the world, right? Obviously, you have to have the sales to become a good entrepreneur. So hopefully people listen to this, get a little inspired and help them make that leap. So I appreciate you having me on.
For sure. It fires me up.
Yeah,
So
me too.
cool. Thanks, Braxton.
Okay, thanks, Clay.